So this student just improved her ACT score from a 27 all the way up to a 35, and I had the chance to interview her and see exactly how she did it.
First time I took the test, I got a 27. Okay, so super score ended up being a 35.
So if you're interested in getting some crazy outcome like this on the ACT, you're probably going to want to pay attention and see how she did it and see how you can apply what she did to your specific situation. So first off, major props to Skylar here, because it's an absolutely incredible outcome to go from this 27 all the way up to a 35. And obviously, this is a completely life-changing event for her. Going from a 27 on the ACT, which by all means is like a pretty solid score, it can get you into some decent colleges, can even earn you a little bit of scholarship money, to all the way up to a 35. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm exaggerating here, but it's a completely life-altering event. With a 35 on the ACT, you can go to pretty much any college in the country, and they're going to look at that as an incredibly impressive accomplishment. You check all of the academic boxes at those schools automatically, and it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get admitted to those schools, but it will give you a significant leg up on all of your competition. And if you have some other parts of your college application that can really make you stand out, then you're a shoe-in at a lot of those top academic schools. And even outside of the top 10, top 15 schools, you're probably guaranteed to get admitted to a lot of those like second tier outside of the Ivy League schools. And you're probably going to get a ton of scholarship offers at those schools outside of the top 10 or top 15. But first off, what really matters for you is, should you copy exactly what Skylar did? So we're going to get into exactly what she did, but you shouldn't necessarily just copy her, because she did some things that were specifically geared towards her specific situation. So we're going to talk about how she did it, but then we're also going to talk about the frameworks for how we approached her process. And you can take some of those lessons and frameworks and apply them to your specific situation. And that will be a better use of your time than just copying exactly what Skylar did. So the first thing Skylar said when I interviewed her about this is that she went into the test the first time that she took it without too much of an approach, without having, a great strategy for approaching the test as a whole and approaching each section of the test individually. And because she didn't have a great strategy that she had practiced before, this left her struggling with timing on all 4 sections of the test. And I think she even said that she had to guess her letter of the day on like the last 10 reading questions. So she was definitely leaking out a lot of points because she didn't have a good approach.
First time I took the test, I didn't really go in with any proper training beforehand, so timing ended up being horrible for me. The English especially, I thought I was doing great, and then you look at the timing and it's you have 10 minutes for 30 more questions. So
after Skylar got this 27 back, she started looking into different ways that she could prepare for the test. And her mom actually came across some videos, probably just like this one, on my YouTube channel, and decided that the ACT hacking system was something that they needed to implement.
So I'm pretty sure my mom heard about you from one of her tennis friends, maybe daughters or sons. And then I watched a YouTube video. I really liked how you broke things down. And I'm just I learned really well off the videos, kind of how I study for AP exams, things like that.
And so Skylar and her mom, after, becoming familiar with my content and stuff, decided to actually take action on the ACT. And they joined my coaching program, where I was able to personally help her implement this ACT hacking system. And so we started off doing exactly what all students who join my coaching program do. I gave her a diagnostic test so that I could figure out exactly where her specific strengths were, and more importantly, the types of questions that she could improve on the most. In that diagnostic test, I found that she was having a lot of issues with, the exact things that she came to me and said that she struggled with, like the timing. But I also found from, the types of questions that she was missing on reading, if we just made a small tweak to her strategy and kind of revamp her approach to that section a little bit, then I think she could make a pretty serious improvement on that reading section.
I think it was great because you quickly figured out what I could improve in the quickest, which we ended up deciding was reading. And you were right, so that ended up being my highest for the next test.
And the other important thing with this diagnostic test is the English section, because she thought that she was missing a lot of questions that were just unconnected to each other, and she couldn't figure out why she was missing so many different types of questions. But I actually found that the question types that she was missing the most of actually kind of all came down, it could all boil down to one specific problem, and that was the fact that she wasn't necessarily super familiar with the differences between independent clauses and dependent clauses and how those kind of fit together in an overall sentence. And so I figured, if we could just make one quick little change there and improve her understanding of those two things, those two concepts and how they fit together, then we would actually see a pretty significant score improvement on the English section. And from there, we started to lay out a specific week by week plan for exactly what she was going to do to approach the ACT. And after discussing it with her a little bit, I found that one of the things that she actually didn't like doing showing that she did in some of her previous preparation was focusing on all 4 sections of the test at the same time. She found that she was spreading herself a little bit too thin by trying to cover all 4 sections of the test at a time. And so because we knew that she was able to super score the test, and because we knew we had a timeline available that would allow her to take 2 different ACT tests, we could actually split this up and only focus on 2 sections of the test going into the first time we took it, and then, put those sections to the side and focus on the other 2 sections of the test going into the second time we took it. And this would allow us to focus on her highest priority areas of the test first and make it so that she was narrowly focused and concentrated and not spreading herself too thin.
So it's all just about making a schedule and obviously like not spending too much time on the things you already know. Like if I opened up a video and I'm like, okay, like I'm pretty sure I understand this.
And so we decided to just focus on the reading and the English sections of the test the first time that we took it, because that way we could make the most improvement with the least amount of time and get her some confidence going into the second time we took it.
You were able to help me a lot with timing wise, like reading. We ended up coming up with a new strategy, and that was like the only thing that was able to get me through the whole reading test. So I guess it was just great that you saw the promise and ended up being able to fix that problem.
And so for the first 2 weeks or so of her plan, she just focused on the reading section. We revamped her strategy to this section. We revamped her approach, and it took a little bit of time for her to get adjusted to the new strategy. But after she was able to, implement the new strategy, then she felt a lot more comfortable on timing, and she did not have to guess on the last 10 questions of the reading section like she did the first time that she took it. And once we saw her scores on some practice reading tests continually hovering around that 34, 35, 36 range, that's when we switched over and we started working on those English improvements that I saw from her diagnostic test. And we created drills for her to specifically recognize those independent and dependent clause rules and, where the punctuation goes and everything like that. And she practiced those concepts on her own, without me just spoon feeding the information to her. And we made sure that she was able to recognize those questions on the real ACT English section, and she was actually making that improvement without, again, necessarily having me spoon feed her the correct information every time. And because we went into this first test only doing these 2 things, only working on that reading strategy and only working on a couple things on the English section, it made it a lot easier for her to focus in on those couple things and actually see that improvement kick in almost right away. And then on that first test, she was able to get a 35 on both that reading section and the English section, which gave her a ton of confidence going into the second test.
So that was just good for me because that was great for super scoring wise. It made me feel a lot more confident, like, okay, if I can get these 2 sections up, which ended up being easier for me, then I can kind of focus on the, I guess, harder ones for me later and feel as if I've already got the higher score for the other 2.
And so after the first test, we really just pushed hard on the math section and the science section heading into that second test. But overall, the process was basically the exact same as it was going into the first test. We found the highest priority question types for her to work on within those math section and science sections. We created a schedule where every week she was going to focus on, this question type here, and then, on the next day she was going to focus on the next question type, and so on and so forth, until she had learned how to recognize and solve each and every single one of her highest priority question types for both the math section and the science section. And most importantly, she learned how to recognize and solve these questions by doing drills on her own without necessarily having me just, sit there and spoon feed her the correct answer each and every time she was working on a practice problem. Because we knew that I wasn't just going to be there sitting next to her on test day, being able to help her out. She had to be able to actually solve these questions, recognize what question type it was, and solve them most efficiently on her own without me telling her exactly what to do. And the reason why I'm harping on this so much is because this is just a super common mistake that I see everybody making. Either they're going to their instructor and just having them spoon feed the correct answer to them every time, or they're just getting their solutions guide and the practice booklet to spoon feed them the correct answer every time. Having a good way to drill and practice these questions to where you can recognize kind of what they look like each and every time is where the actual true learning happens. And Skylar actually mentioned this specifically as a point that helped cure her test anxiety.
Definitely much more confident. Things just seemed to flow better, look familiar. I ended up actually having some extra time on the last bit, which was a pleasant surprise. I definitely deal with some test anxiety, so the only thing that to combat that is knowing I'm prepared.
I feel like everybody has test anxiety, and I feel like I probably said this exact same thing, but I feel like everybody has test anxiety, right? Going into, not everybody, but a lot of people do. But I think the only true way to combat that is, like you said, to just be more prepared. Like if you can read the first half of a question and kind of already know what the second half of the question is going to ask, and you already know you have a process for answering this type of question, it makes it much, much easier, right?
Yes.
And this is how she ended up with her overall super score of a 35 after both of those tests, which, as we all know, and as I've already said before, is a completely life-changing event for her.
Oh my gosh, great. I mean, it's completely a weight off my back, and I feel like it's definitely going to open some doors that seemed closed before.
And because she was extremely diligent and extremely efficient with her time, and she was able to pick up these concepts very quickly, she only had to spend about 1 hour a day for that 8 weeks, and that ended up completely changing her life forever.
Every week, I think I did at least like 6 to 8 hours a week.
It was going into both June and July, right? So it was, what was like maybe 8 weeks total or so?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, not every single student out there will get the exact outcome that Skylar got, but this should give you the confidence that these outcomes are not impossible. They're not some crazy pipe dream. And it also doesn't take some crazy, 15, 20 hours per week over the course of 6 months in order to get an outcome like this. It's possible with a good and efficient process to do this just like Skylar did. So what are the key takeaways that we can learn from this situation? Remember, we're not just going to copy exactly what Skylar did here, but more so learn the frameworks for how you can apply what she did to your specific situation. The first thing she did was she decided to actually take action. That's the first and most important thing. You can try and absorb all the content that you possibly want. You can watch all the YouTube videos, all the Instagram videos, but if you don't actually take action, then you're not gonna make any improvement no matter what. And the second thing that she did was actually create a plan to stay focused for a set period of time. She didn't, distract herself with other activities and, other things that were going on in her life. She decided to dedicate herself to the ACT process for about 8 weeks and did not get distracted during that time. And the third thing she did, and this is where she came to me, was we created a game plan for her specific situation, attacking her highest priority areas of the test first. We didn't just give her a generic program that covered all the types of questions on the ACT. We decided to, only approach the ones that she needed to work on the most. And the fourth thing that she did was then she executed on that game plan, and she learned how to recognize and solve each of her highest priority question types, and she learned to do this on her own without somebody spoon feeding her the correct information every single time. And then lastly, she ingrained that process over and over again with the right drills to make sure that it was second nature to her on test day, and that she was, reading the first half of the question and already knowing exactly what she was going to do to solve that in the most efficient way possible. Now, if you want to check out another case study like this one that goes more in depth on this ACT hacking system, then check out the link in the description below for how my student named Ava was able to take her score from a 22 up to a 30 using ACT hacking. And if you're interested in working with me personally to hack the ACT, then also check out the links further in the description down below for how you can apply to join my coaching program. Other than that, stay tuned for more tips on how to hack the ACT, how to get into the best colleges, and earn the most money and scholarships possible.